And then I remember turning a corner and suddenly just being on Genesis. And that was amazing because it was a huge set and it was active. There were bubbling pools and things that weren't even necessarily in frame in the final film. You could see the artifice around it. You could see that it was built, by people, but it just looked so good and so real. Hey, this is Vadia Potenza. I played Spock, age 13, in the movie Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. And this is Trek Untold.
Hello and welcome to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I am your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. There have been a handful of performers to don the Vulcan ears and get to call themselves Mr. Spock. Of course, there was the great Leonard Nimoy in the original series, we had Zachary Quinto in the J.J. Abrams films, and most recently we've got now Ethan Peck taking on the character in Strange New Worlds. Now you might think that that was basically it, but in reality, there was a whole other group of Spocks that are typically forgotten when it comes to this conversation. Jump back in time with me for a moment here and let's remember Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. And in particular, the time spent on the Genesis planet as the search for Spock, as we mentioned, came to a conclusion once they actually found him. In that film, several different actors took on the role of the character before he grew up to be that certain recognizable adult who played him for many, many decades. And on today's show, we're going to be chatting with one of those other notable Vulcans. Vadia Potenza was only Spock for about less than a minute on screen in Star Trek III, working with Robin Curtis and barely making a sound. He had no lines, although he does do a great job of breathing heavily, but really there's not much to his appearance beyond that. He is without a doubt the guest with the slimmest amount of screen time I've ever chatted with on this show when it comes to Star Trek, but his journey through Hollywood is one that I really want to highlight because I think it's equally important as what he did on Star Trek, if not far more so. After spending some time as a child actor, Vadia found a new interest behind the camera and made a career for himself as an adult working as a director and an editor. This is one of those stories that I really like to showcase on this podcast because for all the people I talk to who perform on screen, there are all the other people who work behind the scenes to make those shows happen. Trek Untold is really all about exposing my audience to new horizons, and this episode, I feel like, is giving some perspective to the world of children actors and really how that led Vadia down a new path in post-production where he is thriving, prospering, and frankly, kicking butt. And of course, he's got plenty of fun stories to tell about the shows he's worked on as an editor, and it's a side of the industry that most Trek fans probably don't hear about too often. So I'm very glad to bring some of those tales to you today. So let's put on our Vulcan listening ears and get to know a Spock who spends his time not inside a shuttle bay, but in an editing bay. And that is with Mr. Vadia Potenza. But before we start our chat with this week's guest, I want to remind you to please follow Trek Untold on social media, including Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find this show on all of those platforms simply by searching for Trek Untold. Make sure you subscribe to this show, whether that's on the audio platform of your choosing or on YouTube, where the video version of this show lives. And speaking of, make sure to check out our YouTube channel more frequently for episodes of our new mini show, Tales from Trek Untold, as well as other sci-fi goodies. And of course, don't forget to leave ratings, reviews, comments, and whatever you can do no matter what platform you're on to enjoy this podcast and show others that you're digging it too. If you want to support this show financially, please consider becoming a Patreon member at patreon.com/TrekUntold. Shout out to Trek Long Island, who is having their second annual convention this summer at Hop Hog, Long Island, New York, from May 31st to June 2nd. Headlined by Melissa Navia from Strange New Worlds, Armin Shimmerman, Chase Masterson, and J.G. Hertzler from DS9, Ethan Phillips from Star Trek Voyager, and Gabrielle Ruiz from Lower Decks. Among many other modern and classic Trek shows, this 3-day event will feature autographs, panels, including some with yours truly, and other ways for you to hang out with the stars and meet your fellow fans. You can learn more about this event or buy tickets for it at treklongisland.com. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and beam in this week's guest. Computer, access interview file. He's all grown up when we last saw him on the Genesis planet, and a lot has happened in those 4 decades. Joining me now across the screen, we've got Vadia, or Vaj, Potenza. Vaj, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going? A quick correction on the name. Vadia was how it was spelled, but it was all actually pronounced Vaja.
That's
It's
why it's Vaj.
Yeah, that's why it got truncated to Vaj, basically.
See, I didn't know.
It's
You've been kind of told me to just call you Vaj. I never knew like the proper way to say that. So
it's
that's
very convoluted because that's not even my full name. I was named after my grandfather from Kiev. My full name is Vsevolod, and so yeah, say that 5 times fast.
no, I will not.
Like there's a diminutive for that in Russian, Ukrainian. I'm not sure. Pronounced Vadia, spelled Vadia. There's no J in the Cyrillic alphabet, and then that just got shortened to Vaj.
See, I
So
should have known better because I just interviewed
anyway,
Natalia Nogalich recently, and I don't even know if I said her name right there, but her first name is spelled with a J instead of the Y, so equally confusing if you don't know.
yeah, yeah. Um, anyway, so that's it. Have a good day. I'll see you later.
All right, thank you very much, Vaj. All right, yeah, so
Um,
we've actually known each other a little bit since we met last year for the first Trek Long Island event, and you were part of my very first celebrity moderation panel where I got to speak with you and Robin Curtis on stage, which was like the coolest thing ever. So I'm happy we're getting to now kind of run it back and spend some more time with just you to like really dig into what you do as far as the world of Star Trek, what you're doing now beyond that world.
so I mostly make my living as a TV editor, occasionally film, but mostly TV. And I'm really just kind of a boring suburban dad, you know, raises his kids and drives them around a lot. And yeah, just trying to stay creative, trying to stay in this world, you know. I love filmmaking. I love filmmakers. I love storytellers. Anytime I can kind of work with creative storytellers, I'm excited and honored to do that.
So first thing I want to get started with, Vaj, is the question I ask all my guests here before we start digging into the future of young Spock.
Mhm.
Vaj, how about for yourself? What's your earliest memory of Star Trek? Did you grow up as a fan of the show?
Absolutely. I have really early memories of it just it being on our little TV in our apartment in New York. You know, I just remember sitting in a high chair, like eating something, watching it. There's, you know, I have early memories of playing with the Mego figures. Somewhere, I wish I had it. It's in deep storage in one of my parents' places. There's a picture of 5-year-old me Christmas morning with the Mego Enterprise, you know, that kind of vinyl thing that would fold out, and all the a few of the figures in there, and just like I can picture that in my head, and it just immediately gives me like this childlike joy of that day. So yeah, I feel like Star Trek was just omnipresent in my life from the get. You know, growing up, I just devoured any kind of sci-fi, fantasy, any kind of genre stuff because there wasn't that much of it in, you know, the 70s and 80s. I mean, it was not like now. I mean, there was a lot, but TV film, it was, you know, there were like 3 or 4 franchises, you know. There was Trek Wars, Galactica, Buck Rogers. Um yeah, Star Trek was just always kind of around, and I just took to it from very early on.
It's kind of fun because we both have similar memories about Star Trek and toys because mine are similar. Like I can actually remember certain episodes of TNG since I was like young enough when TNG had just begun. But I think more of my memories relate to like the Galoob action figures. So
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
it's like a
Yeah.
generational thing, you know, like older fans, they know the first show airing on black and white TVs. Fans from like the coming into around the like 80s or whatever or 70s, it's toys.
I also remember when TNG came out, sitting on the school bus, like having watched the pilot and like discussing it with my nerd friends, just, you know, very seriously, just being like, yeah, it feels like Star Trek. I think they got it right. Like we were hopeful, and we were right to be hopeful.
So let's kind of dig in a little bit more here, Vaj. I'd like to know a little bit about your secret origin story. So, can you tell us where you grew up, who your parents were, and what they did, and what little Vaj wanted to be when he grew up?
Yeah. So I was very lucky that I got to bounce between New York and LA. My parents' divorce was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Basically, it was amicable. Dad was in New York, mom was in LA.
That's
I
pretty
would,
good.
yeah, and so I would spend the year. I'd spend the summers in New York, Hell's Kitchen, which is one of the reasons I love Daredevil, and then in LA, kind of Topanga Canyon, up in one of the canyons, kind of south of Malibu, north of Santa Monica. When you're a little kid in LA, if you don't have a headshot and an agent, they basically call CPS on your parents. So, I just had to get one at like 10 years old. I had no choice. And lucked into Star Trek. But little Vaj, like growing up, I think I all the all the standard little kid aspirations, for a while I wanted to be a firefighter, and then I wanted to be an astronaut. Um and But it's funny, like growing up in LA, the industry is such a constant background noise. So we were always sort of, my friends and I were always sort of poring over like making of books or things like that. So kind of filmmaking was always around. It was just the music of the spheres. And I never, as a little kid, never thought like I want to be a director or I want to be an actor or anything like that. The way I actually decided to try acting again was my mother was an off-Broadway actress for 10 years in New York. Um, and she did a commercial for a product called Dristan, which was like a cold medicine,
Hmm.
with me as a 2-year-old baby. And so it was like, achoo, oh, I hope my baby doesn't catch my cold. And then, try Dristan and your baby will be fine. So we were one day going through her old headshots and stuff, and there were production stills from that commercial. And I just said, Mom, I think I want to try acting. So we went through the rigmarole of getting headshots, and I was lucky enough to get an agent relatively quickly. I also think like I was very much, most of the calls you would go out on at when I was that young age, it was just me and hundreds of other little kids that looked more or less like me, but were all smarter and more charming. It was just, I mean, an agent would just get a ton of kids and just throw them all at this audition. And it was just a game of numbers. If one of your clients got it as an agent, then you got the percentage. So I went to a lot of what they called cattle calls
Mm.
back in the day. But even that was, in retrospect, was pretty cool. I mean, you would see kids you recognize from other things, and I'll never forget the I can't remember his last name. The kid who played Boxy on the original Battlestar Galactica. Noah was his first name. Are you looking him up right now?
Yes, I am.
Good, thank you. But I just remember running into him at one of these calls, and in my brain, I just thought he was someone I knew because I recognized him. And I was just like, "Hey, what's going on? How you been?" Just very familiar. And he was sort of like, "Oh, yeah, hi, nice to see you." We parted ways, and afterwards, I was like, "Oh yeah, we don't actually know each other. I just recognized that guy from Battlestar." There was like fun stuff like that.
That was Noah Leslie Hathaway, who was also Atreyu in the Neverending Story.
That's right. That's right. And actually, one of my first, I didn't get it, but I went out for Neverending Story. That was like one of my first auditions.
I think,
Obviously, I didn't get it.
according to IMDb, your first gig was Father Murphy. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah,
Do you remember anything from your very first time, like walking onto a set?
I do. Yeah, we shot in Tucson, Arizona. I played a little kid named James. Actually, you can find it on YouTube. It's an episode called "In God's Arms," and I die. So
Spoilers.
um, eh, that's the beginning, not the end. That's the inciting incident, actually. Um, There's this monk, Father Joe, and he finds me. I'm a runaway on the side of the road, and I had eaten some poison plants, and I have this whole delirious scene where I think I'm talking to my parents, but this monk is trying to comfort me, and then I die, and that's one of many contributing factors that leads to him questioning his faith. So I remember that. We shot out in Tucson, Arizona, in kind of this old west town that's just made for shooting westerns. Merlin Olsen was the star of that show. A young Corey Feldman was also in that episode. And I just remember, I think that was one of his earliest parts too, because I just remember both of us being really excited about the craft service table. Like there were donuts and nobody was guarding them. We were just like, wait, we can just take these and nobody cares. And then so that was my first thing. I think it was just a day of shooting. Like they flew us out there and it was, makeup, wardrobe, shoot, home. And if you watch the episode, the first shot, the monk finds me on the side of the road, and he kind of scoops me up and turns away from camera to carry me off. And they said to me before we shot, they're like, "All right, you're unconscious. Don't smile," which is the worst thing you can say to someone. It's like saying, "Don't think of an elephant." So if you watch the show, like right as he's turning away from camera, like I start to crack a smile. And that was fun. I didn't do much. It was like that and Star Trek and one Mattel commercial for Mexico. And but once you do Star Trek, there's no place to go from there but down. So
Well, now I got to ask, what did you do for Mattel? Do you remember what that toy was you were doing the advertisement for?
Rocket Hockey, it was called.
Rocket Hockey. Wow.
And it was fun. It was only it was Mattel for Mexico. So this commercial did not run in the United States. And it was like a spinning top. You'd sort of rev it up and it would come out in this arena and it would come towards your goal and you had to just knock it towards your opponent. It was very chaotic.
Sounds pretty cool. Very obscure toy. Yeah, I gotta look that up after.
Yeah, maybe they released it in the States under a different name because I don't remember ever seeing it. I mean, I didn't look that hard, but in my later years, I kind of looked for it a little bit just to see if it was around.
But yeah, basically you went from Father Murphy to Star Trek 3, right? It pretty much was nothing between. It's just here's this gig on Father Murphy, and hey, guess what? Star Trek.
Yeah. I mean, from the outside looking in, it looks like that. I mean, in between were a bunch of those cattle calls, with the kids who looked and sounded like me, and mostly that was commercials and stuff. But yeah, Star Trek was the next big one.
So do you remember the audition for that gig at all?
Very well.
Another cattle call, or was this a little bit more intimate, maybe?
No, this was more intimate for sure. I mean, in retrospect, I think they must have gone through a lot of headshots or something because normally you go into these waiting rooms and like I said, there would be, dozens, if not hundreds of other kids. And this was not. This was the only other Spocks I remember seeing are the ones who got the part. Like Carl Steven, may he rest in peace. Stephen Manley, who was the one after me, the lucky Pon Farr Spock.
Just missed it by a few years.
Yeah. I remember that, and I saw Nimoy right away. There was not I think he probably personally wanted to vet all the potential Spocks. I just remember talking to him and he was asking me about my name and I told him the story I told you at the beginning, and he had relatives that were also from that part of the world and we sort of connected on that. And I remember like us smiling at each other, kind of just like smiling and locking eyes. And for me, that sort of, in my brain, that sort of clinched it, like we connected. But he was very, Nimoy was just Mr. Nimoy, Mr. Leonard Nimoy. I don't know. I can't hold his name in enough respect. I don't even know how to say it now, because it doesn't carry enough respect. But he he was just very calm and very focused, and there's a very gentle nature about him, and that was on set as well. And then apparently while my mom, who drove me around all these things, was waiting in the waiting room, the receptionist complimented her on being so calm. Said like, "Oh, you're a lot more calm than a lot of the." So I don't know, maybe that helped. Like, hey, this kid doesn't come with like a crazy stage mom.
Yeah. Now, remind us about how old you were at this time. You're like 8 or 9, 10?
No, I was 12 when we shot, you know, playing Spock age 13, so I was playing a little older, very mature for my age.
Mm.
Um, but I was I'm trying to get the timeline right. I may have been 11 when I went to the first call. And I did it and it was lovely and we didn't hear anything for a really long time and I just sort of chalked it off to like, well, it was cool. I met Leonard Nimoy, there's a little footnote.
Mm.
And then I went back to New York for the summer to visit my dad in Hell's Kitchen. And then we got the call for a callback, like, can he be here next week? So, we scrambled to get a ticket and I flew back to LA and, did the callback. And, and it worked out. And now I believe I am one of 11 Spocks. Is that right? Is that the current count?
I'm gonna go with it because I think you know more about the Spock count than I do, but there's it's not a lot. There's there's enough.
And I wear this as a badge of honor. I don't want to sound resentful. I think I'm the Spock with the least screen time out of any Spock.
I think that it's between you and Baby Spock, I think, in Star Trek 3, right?
Well, he had a little bit more, I think,
Yeah.
because when they first find him in the snow, they have that moment where he kind of brushes Savik's cheek and I don't know, it felt a little longer, but
That might have been a stunt baby though that was filling in, so I think he might be most continuous,
a double baby.
So
30 seconds of magic, baby.
Attention all Starfleet personnel. New York's only fan-run Star Trek convention, Trek Long Island, is back this summer. Get ready for 3 days of sci-fi fun celebrating your favorite franchise in the Empire State. Meet the stars from Trek shows spanning different eras, including Melissa Navia and Yetide Badaki from Strange New Worlds, Gabrielle Ruiz from Lower Decks, Armin Shimmerman, Chase Masterson, J.G. Hertzler, and Kitty Swink from DS9, Ethan Phillips from Voyager, Janet Kidder, Tara Rosling, Conrad Coates, and Elias Defexis from Discovery, and many more, including celebrities who haven't been at a Star Trek convention in years, like Clyde Kasatsu, Natalia Nogalich, and Daphne Ashbrook. Come meet your fellow fans. Take in a panel with your favorite podcasters. Enjoy Dinner with the Stars, featuring live musical performances. Meet authors, artists, and musicians, and so many more during this epic 3-day event brought to you by the talented and inclusive community that makes Star Trek go at warp speed. Trek Long Island takes place from May 31st to June 2nd at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Hauppauge, New York. Visit treklongisland.com for tickets, exclusive packages, and more information. Trek Long Island, going kindly this summer.
So I'm curious now because this is 1984. VCRs are still relatively new. And we know that you are a Star Trek fan, but like, were you up to date on what was happening in the movies? Did you know what happened at the end of Star Trek 2?
Oh, absolutely, 1,000%. Star Trek, a new Star Trek movie would come out, and we would go opening weekend. It was not a question. We were all kind of traumatized from Spock's death in Star Trek 2. I think I can say that now without it being a spoiler, right? We passed the statute of limitations on Wrath of Khan.
If you didn't know, now you know.
So years went by and we were just kind of like, wow, I guess Spock is dead now. And you kind of do that thing, because back then they wouldn't shoot these movies back to back. It was like 3 years in between or more. And, you would do that thing on the playground where you would just argue like, no, he's not dead because this, or, same thing, different franchise, when Vader told Luke he was his father, there were 3 years where we were just like, no, he's not his father because, of this thing, or Boba Fett's actually his father because he shot at him and missed, you would just like parse these this minutia. So when I got Star Trek 3, even then I didn't realize, they didn't tell me what the story was. I didn't have script pages. I mean, I was on the Paramount lot for a day. I knew I was playing a Vulcan, but I didn't know I was playing young Spock. So I didn't have any context for the scene. Even after I shot it, it's just like you're in this cave with Savick, and you know, look up at her, slack jawed, close your eyes. When I give the signal, snap them open. Like I didn't. So we shot it, and it was a fantastic day. But afterwards, all my friends and they said, "Don't tell anyone what happens." And I was like, I don't know what happens. I just, I was, I was in this really tiny little part of it. Yeah, my friends were like, so does he live? Does he live? And I was just like, I don't know. I have no idea. Like, it wasn't until we saw the movie when it came out, when I went to the screening, that, I saw how they put the story together. And then I was like, oh, I was Spock. So I don't know. Maybe I was kind of dim as a kid. Maybe, but I don't remember anyone calling me Spock, on set or anything like that. It was very much like, oh, we're going to put your Vulcan ears on, and here's the Vulcan prayer robe, and I know that was Spock's burial robe / meditation robe, but at the time I don't think I realized that. It was just a robe with some Vulcan writing on it.
So they kept it very, very secret. Even back then, like you had no access to anything else. It was just,
I
here's your
mean,
one page, go for it.
yeah. I mean, I don't think I even had a page because I didn't have lines or anything. It was just show up on the set, and Mr. Nimoy is going to tell you what to do, and you're going to do that. And I remember being nervous because, well, anytime you get a part, you're just like, am I just going to completely screw this up? So, I mean, and I think at the time I was little, so I didn't necessarily understand the concept of multiple takes and coverage and stuff like that. So every time they were like shooting it again, I was like, oh no, did I screw up? Um, but Leonard Nimoy was just, he was so lovely. He was just very, he'd like get down on one knee and talk to me, and very much talk to me as if I was the only person there. There was no, I don't recall a whole lot of yelling on the set or a lot of tension. Like, I've definitely been on sets where, everybody kind of has smoke coming out of their ears and, was feeling anxious, or there's just a lot of, or just all the communication is happening at a very high decibel level. And this was not Mr. Nimoy's set at all. It was just very, soft spoken. Okay, we're going to go over here. We're going to sit over here, and the camera's going to be here, and your eye line's going to be here. And it was nice. It was a nice environment to be in. I wanted to be there more. And I remember feeling very disappointed at lunchtime that I didn't get to have lunch with Mr. Nimoy. But I think he might have been busy that day.
Yeah, just a little busy, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. So can you kind of paint us a picture now of the feeling of the set, whatever you can remember, like first time you've seen the set, because you're really new in acting. This is your second gig besides, really, second film gig really, or TV gig, whatever. You have a commercial. This is Star Trek.
Yeah.
So you're on a pretty big set. You're working with Robin Curtis. As brief as it might be, I mean, this is still pretty big. This is still pretty epic for young Vaj.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So drive onto the Paramount lot, and I'm getting to the awe part, so bear with me as I go through the cynical part first. Because LA is such a factory town, and I had relatives and friends that were actors. I had been on sets. I had been around it. Friends' parents were filmmakers. I had been on the Paramount lot, so that was kind of like, oh, we're here on the Paramount lot again. Then you go on the soundstage and you walk through kind of this little dusty area, and it's just full of like, grip and electric, and, nothing really spectacular. And then I remember turning a corner and suddenly just being on Genesis. And that was amazing because it was a huge set. I mean, and this is obviously pre-digital set extension. So they built a really big set, and it was active. There were bubbling pools, and I think a waterfall, if I'm remembering correctly, like things that weren't even necessarily in frame in the final film. But they built it in such a way that they could shoot at any number of angles and not go off the set. So it was just suddenly it was just like awe-inspiring, because you could see the artifice around it. You could see that it was built, by people, but it just looked so good and so real. And the art directors, the set builders, they just did such an outstanding, like such a stunning job. Like it's such an amazing craft that kind of sometimes gets relegated to the background because we're focused on the story and the actors and stuff like that. But it was really it kind of blew my mind. And then there was a producer on the film, and I cannot remember his name. And I think he also played one of the Klingons, like not one of the main ones, but one of the gunners. And he kind of took me around, and we went on the set of the Grissom. He showed me the USS Grissom. I didn't get to see the set of the Enterprise, but and we went in, to props and costumes. And I kind of remember looking at a table with a lot of Klingon stuff laid out, disruptors and triporders and stuff like that. And, basically putting my hands in my pockets because I wanted to touch everything. And I knew that would be a bad idea.
Yeah, very bad.
I wanted to pick it all up and play with it. But, and then it was about 3 hours in the makeup chair for the ears and the eyebrows, about 45 minutes in front of the camera. And, good old fashioned, I think Panavision, Panaflex, 35 millimeter camera with a, big old mag on top. It was amazing. And just that set, to this day, like I watch the film and I'm kind of in awe of the way they, it's almost a real life version of what they did in the film,
Mm-hmm.
Instead of transforming a dead moon, they transformed a barren soundstage.
Now, I know from our Trek Long Island panel that you did take a souvenir from that set with you. So you got you were given somehow you managed to get your ears out, which is kind of a big deal.
Nobody stopped me. I mean, I literally left the set in full makeup.
Really? You just walked out, eyebrows and everything?
Yeah, eyebrows and everything. And then went to a movie that night with my friends in full makeup. Like had it on because I so badly wanted someone to be like, hey, why do you have Spock ears on? Nobody did. 12 years old. And I'm like, huh? So I have one of the ears here. I lost one in a flood. And this one, I wish I had known to take better care of it. It kind of looks like a piece of like chicken that got left in the sun. But this is like my little, I'll try to get it close to the camera, my little Spock ear. You can kind of see, I mean, it's flattened, but there's like a little arc here that's where it kind of went over the ear, and this piece went down the back. So I think this was my left ear here. So I'm holding on to it. I mean, it's latex. Latex is organic. It degrades over time. So unfortunately, it's glorious fleeting.
Not much you can do, but it's cool that you had it this long, that's lasted this long, and that you got to take it home, because really a lot of folks go on to sets and they don't get that. No. I mean, it's sort of, I guess, they were like, don't tell anybody what happened. Now get out of here, you little scamp. And, nobody took my ears off. They must have offered to take it off. I mean, they must have at one point said, hey, do you want to take your stuff off? And I said no, but I don't remember that. I just remember seeing a movie with my friends that night. We saw Risky Business, which we were probably a little young to see, but it was the 80s.
It was the 80s. In my full Spock makeup.
Hey everybody, we'll get right back to the interview in 1 second, but I wanted to remind you all to check out Trek Untold over at Patreon. Patreon is the best way to directly support creators of things you like through a monthly subscription of an amount that you can choose. Trek Untold has a few different tiers already with different benefits, ranging from early access to episodes, the ability to ask a future guest questions, exclusive merchandise, and other bonuses that I'd love to offer, but first I need to grow that Patreon community to do that. Trek Untold has been around since mid-2020 and has grown a ton since then, thanks to listeners and viewers like you. Through a platform like Patreon, you can help me keep improving the quality of each episode and keep bringing you new interviews with folks that make the Star Trek universe what it is. If this community can grow more over on Patreon, I can offer new perks like watch parties, exclusive Trek Untold episodes, being able to directly interact with guests, and other things, but in order to do that, I need to know my audience wants these things. The best way to tell me what you want is by supporting us on Patreon, so please, check us out at patreon.com/TrekUntold today and become a bigger part of the Trek Untold family. And now, back to the interview. Now, you mentioned you did get to see the bridge of the Grissom, which is really cool, but I gotta ask, did you sit in the captain's chair?
Not at that time, no. I was actually so nervous about touching anything, and I don't think the Grissom was a hot set at that point. Like, I don't know if they had actually shot there yet because it was dark. And no one offered me the captain's chair either, and no one said like, hey, you want to take a picture in the captain's chair? Because again, I think they were being so careful about guarding this film and every detail of it. So it was just more like, kind of walking around. I walked around the captain's chair. I looked at the captain's chair. But I didn't touch anything or sit in anything because I just, had visions of pressing one button and the entire set just collapses in on itself.
Like a puzzle box from Hellraiser.
Yeah, exactly.
So, fast forward now to release date. Were you part of like the big movie premiere in Hollywood? Did you kind of see it where you lived with your friends?
We had a cast and crew screening in Hollywood, but I feel like it was just cast and crew, the one I went to. I do remember in line speaking to, oh man, I'm so sorry, I'm blanking on his name. The Jen who played Spock age 25, basically the final Spock before he's Nimoy again. I think Joe is his name.
Joe Davis.
Joe Davis. I remember talking to him in line because I hadn't interacted with him that much. He had other shoot days and different shoot days from me, but and I remember, Nimoy getting up and kind of thanking everybody and, here we go. But it was not like a, star-studded red carpet premiere or anything like that. So it was just cast and crew screening. And then, I went home and called my friends and was like, it's really good. We have to see it. And then, I think we all went and paid to see it in the theater a whole bunch more times.
Were your friends like all flipping out when they saw you on the big screen?
Yeah, one friend of mine told me years later that when he found out that I got the part, he like got really mad because he was a big Trekker. Like he would probably, we all loved it, but of our little friend group, he was probably the most into it, and he got really mad when he found out I got the part, and his mom made him call me and sort of congratulate me. But he's like way more successful than me now. He's like this really amazing animation director. He like directs Rick and Morty and stuff. So he's like, we got past that. But yeah, it was we were all kind of in awe of the process a little bit, and just in awe of seeing it, and I remember kind of, sitting in the theater, having just seen it once, kind of anticipating my part and just being like, it's coming. Oh, that was it. It's done.
But it was there. That's what mattered.
Yeah, no, it was there. I sort of feel like, there's all these athletes that carry the Olympic torch, and there's always like a kid who wins a contest that gets to carry it for like a block. I feel like that's me with the character of Spock. Like it's like a tremendous honor to have been Spock for that little moment. But, I'm just all the talented people that I've ever given Spock life, I sort of feel like, oh, how lucky I am to just carry this torch for a block and then hand it off to someone else that, did amazing things with it.
So a lot of folks might not know, while your time in Star Trek 3 was a little fleeting, you did play Spock again later in life.
Yeah. The QVC version of Spock. Are you talking about UFO Club?
UFO Club.
Yeah, so UFO Club was a micro-budget feature film that I edited last year, and I think it's currently on Amazon. It's streaming now. It's like Amazon and Tubi, I think. And the character, it's basically about a nerdy kid growing up in Long Island, and he's trying to get this videotape that it supposedly has proof of an alien crash, on, I think it was Jones Beach. Um, and yeah, so there's a scene where they're watching QVC, and it's like the Star Trek QVC. They're selling, Trek collector's plate, and there's this. I guess I didn't know this. At one point in his career, William Shatner went on QVC as a guest when they were selling Star Trek merchandise, and apparently was really not into it. So we actually had an actor kind of do his best disinterested, Shatner as a background track for the TV. And then I just came on. That's my little cameo. Never mind. Yeah, I just came on as like when they break to commercial, and I put myself in the corniest, the worst Star Trek gear. I was trying to look like someone on like a home shopping network would look if they were trying to very quickly make themselves look like a Vulcan. So it was just those giant plastic over ear ears, and I put like tinfoil on a red shirt, and just said, "And we'll be right back." But that's a really, it's a sweet little film written by a really talented and directed by a guy named Steven Sapellis, who just that guy is a hardcore Trekkie, and grew up on Long Island, and we've worked together through the years, and he got like a little bit of money to make this movie, and I just said, "Hey, can I maybe help with some of the editing?" And they wound up kind of giving me the whole thing to cut. And yeah, it was fun. It made some it did well in some little festivals. It won some awards and stuff, and yeah, I got to bring back. In my mind, that wasn't Spock.
Mm.
That was someone who worked for the Home Shopping Channel, trying their best to look like Spock, and and failing miserably at it.
That was literally the meme of "I want Spock. We have Spock at home. Spock at home."
Yeah, Spock.
So while your time in acting might not have been too long, because I know you kind of got out of it at a fairly young age, but you did stay, as we mentioned, and as we just mentioned right here, you did stay within the world of film and TV, and that basically moving you behind the camera. So how did you kind of transition yourself from being in front to behind the lens?
My deep-seated need for the approval of other people just sublimated itself to behind the camera work.
Oh, good. We have another thing in common. Excellent.
Yeah. No, I got out of it. I mean, it wasn't an instant transition at all. I kind of hit my later teenage years, and I was driving, and just wanted to go skateboard with my friends, and just was not interested in dropping everything and going to these calls, and it just lost its appeal for me. And again, I mean, I say it in a joking tone, but really after Star Trek, like there wasn't that much, I wasn't dreaming of doing a part, I wasn't, and it was more, acting was more like something I tried and lucked into something amazing. And, and once I got a taste of that, that was enough.
Mm.
So I got out of it for a while. College, I wrote a lot for like skateboard magazines. I wrote for Thrasher magazine back in like the late 80s and early 90s. And like wrote for the school paper, and kind of, was studying fiction and writing and English and literature and all that. And when I graduated, I fully thought I was going to go into some form of print journalism. This was like 95, so print journalism was still a thing back then. Came back to New York. I was in college in California, in Santa Barbara, and came back to New York, and just looking for a job, and got a job as a production assistant at Jim Henson Productions, the Muppets. my it's kind of nepo baby stuff. My dad knew a guy who was running one of the studios in Manhattan. They had on the Upper East Side, there was this wonderful brownstone that the bottom floor was kind of a tiny little sound studio. The middle floor was post production, and then the top floor was offices. So they hired me there as a PA. And I just had some really amazing people there that kind of just mentored me. One guy in particular, this guy named David Gumble, just, he eventually they sort of let me work my way up to where I was shooting, I was editing, I was directing little things. I got to work with, like, Jim Henson was gone at that point, but I got to work with, like, Frank Oz. I got to work with Michael Frith, who had created Fraggle Rock, Jerry Nelson, like a lot of the original Muppeteers. And then, some of the what were then kind of the new generation. So I'm friends with a lot of puppet people now.
Hmm.
Stephanie D'Abruzzo, who made Kate Monster famous in the original Broadway play of Avenue Q. Just, I don't know, incredible people, and it was an incredible time, and I think I appreciate it more now than I did then, in retrospect, because I really got to just do a little of everything there. I didn't go to film school, but that was kind of my film school.
Hmm.
Um, and so that was in New York. They moved, I think it was around 99, 2000. They moved most of their production back out to LA. I went out there, back out for a little while. But at that point, uh, just something about the East Coast very much felt like home to me. Like, I'm not an LA hater at all. I love it out there, but I don't know, something about the East Coast just resonates with me. So I kind of just was like, that's where I want to try to make my stand and earn my living. So I came back to New York and, just started freelancing in any kind of production job I could get. And as time went on, that mostly became editing. That seems to be the thing that people want to pay me to do the most. But I've worked as a cinematographer. I have directed little things, like mostly music videos, stuff like that. I guess I sort of fell back in love with it. I was very serious about writing when I got out of college, but then I kind of came back into this world of filmmaking, of TV, and just thought, like, here's this amazing collaborative medium where just people with all these disciplines come together and try to make a thing. And yeah, a lot of times it just crashes and burns, but when it doesn't, even when it does crash and burn, it's so beautiful because, you know, I mean, think of, like, the crappiest, trashiest thing you've ever seen, and even on that, there were just people working so hard to try to, like, get something right and collaborating, and so it's just like, I just found and find the whole process of filmmaking exhausting but incredibly inspiring.
I was looking through your resume to see some of the things that you've edited on, and I was surprised to see like you did some of the AE biography docs,
Oh yeah,
which
yeah,
is
I
pretty
did
cool
it.
because like in that point in time, like A&E was really popular and known for their docs, and it was kind of interesting because they were this more less like less Grey Gardens, more tabloidy kind of thing.
Mhm.
So what do you remember about editing on that and editing in that particular style of journalism and documentary?
Oh, I loved working on those. My favorite was, we did a David Bowie one, was one of the very first ones I did on, just it was we were kind of a team of three. There was me, my producer, and our associate producer, and we were all just giant Bowie fans, and just so excited to be, like, telling the story. And it wasn't there were different levels of biography. There was kind of like, there were ones where the celebrity participated, and that was like the top tier, and that was not ours. And then there were ones where the celebrity was like, "Yeah, go ahead and do it. I don't want to be involved, but here's some people that will talk about me, and I'm fine with that." And then there were ones, and that was the Bowie one, I think. And then there were ones where the celebrity was like, "No, I don't want you to do it," and they went ahead and did it anyway. But that's another story. Uh, so we were kind of the mid-tier. Unfortunately, with the Bowie one, there was some issue with the licensing of the music, and I don't know the whole story, and I don't really want to. I guess there's something I don't really want to dive into mostly because it's boring and sad. So as much as I loved working on that episode, we wound up not being able to use a lot of his music, So it was, someone would be like, and then he came out with Space Oddity, and then I had to find something that that sounded a little bit like Space Oddity, but wasn't Space Oddity, But those are fun. That's very much, I mean, the A&E, the biography, that style of documentary in general is just very much how can you emphasize a story being told with visuals, And a lot of times we would just have a very limited amount of photos we could use. So, or video or something, so it was always like, okay, how can we take this one photo and treat it like 5 different ways so it feels like you're not looking at the same photo for 5 minutes. But I also had our production team on Bowie, especially, they just did all these great little in studio things where they would just kind of shoot these little inserts of whatever, like makeup on a table or something, just things that gave it some life, and I think that's so much about, when you're cutting a documentary is just those little visuals that feel a little bit alive that just help the story move along. So that was a challenge, but also fun.
You worked on something else that got my attention because this is going to be a weird, obscure one, and I think you only did it for an episode or two. But so for folks who don't know, before I started doing the Star Trek stuff and more of the nerdy stuff, I was doing coverage of like mixed martial arts and UFC. That was like my beat for a long time. You already know where I'm going with this.
I know what you're gonna ask me about.
So yeah, so when
Oh man,
around early 2000s, The Ultimate Fighter debuted on TV, and that became like the hot thing on TV, and everybody was doing MMA all of a sudden. Everybody had to have their mixed martial arts reality show, and you worked on one for BET called The Iron Ring.
Iron Ring, yeah.
Oh my goodness, that
Woo!
was of all the knockoffs that came out of UFC's Ultimate Fighter.
Did you actually see any episodes of that? Like,
I have the whole season.
You do?
I do.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Wow. Yeah. So that was a case of, I think the original vision just fell apart.
That's putting it politely.
Yeah, because the concept at the beginning, and when they hired me, they were like, yeah, we're getting hip hop artists, and they're each going to pick an MMA team, and they're going to get a coach, and they're going to like go against each other. So it was like Nelly, it was Ludacris, it was like Dipset Crew, a couple others I can't remember off the top of my head.
I mean, they had some big names. They had like Floyd Mayweather in there.
But the thing is, they had these big names, but they didn't really have these big names. So they would get them like one time, like here they are having dinner with their fighters, and then they wouldn't show up again because they were like, why? I'm not really interested in this. And then it kind of turned into, they were, well, we got to have some fights. So then they would like get a team together and they'd make them fight each other, and the coach is like, why is my team fighting each other? Why aren't they fighting another team? And so it was just very, I want to tread lightly here because I don't want to badmouth anybody, because making TV is hard, and making TV with celebrities is like incredibly hard. But things changed a lot in the production, and we were sort of, those of us in post-production were sort of scrambling to catch up and like make a story out of something that that was not the story it was supposed to be. It was like, oh, now like we just have them all in a gym, and well, here's a funny scene where this guy is giving this other guy, he's talking smack to this other guy who hurt his ankle, but like it was really, really hard to make a cohesive story out of it. And I worked with 2 amazing women that were like the post producers on it, and I think one of them is now an executive at Discovery. And the other one I think maybe does Real Housewives of Atlanta, but just like incredibly intelligent women. And these poor women were just crying because it was just that the stuff would come in and it was not what we were supposed to get. It was just, it'd be like if I told you, like, yeah, oh, I'm gonna have this amazing scene where like Ludacris team fights Nelly's team, and then I send you a video of like a cat, and it was just like, well, that's all we got. So make that into an episode. The cat's cute. So yeah, that was it got ugly towards the end. People got fired. We those of us in post were sort of tasked with like, you know, bringing the plane in for a crash landing, as it were. Like the BET executives came in and were, trying to save it, and it was messy. It was very, very messy.
It was a very ambitious show that might have bit off a little bit more than it could chew.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, I think like it's a fantastic pitch. Like if you pitch that to someone, and that might have been a little bit of, the fake it till you make it. The people that pitched it were like, yeah, we're gonna get hip hop celebrities. They're gonna get teams. They're gonna fight each other. Oh my God, great! Here's money. And then it's like, oh, now we have to figure out how to make that happen. And they didn't really quite make it happen. But again, you know, I want to pump the brakes because making TV, making any kind of show, making a bad show is just so challenging. And there's just so many things that can go awry. So if
It is
people
what it
don't
is.
if people don't take risks, stuff, I mean, we lose good stuff too. So that was yeah, that show was a little bit of a train wreck.
Yeah.
Um
But it is what it is.
yeah, yeah. I will say one final thing about that, just watching like the behind the scenes, the artists that we had on. I didn't meet any of them because I was just editing. I was in a post suite, but just watching behind the scenes stuff with like Ludacris and like Joel Santana and Nelly, like they all just seemed really cool, like really down to earth. Like when they were interacting with like the fighters or little kids or stuff like that, they'd show up to a gym and they'd get mobbed, but they just, like everyone on that show, those three specifically that I mentioned just seemed like very down to earth, very cool people. So in another context, it would have been amazing.
So what can you tell us, Vaj, about the things that you're working on right now in 2024 and beyond? Or what are you allowed to talk about as well? Keep it
Yeah,
that
I
way,
got
keep it
I got
safe.
some stuff I'm allowed to talk about. I think I currently work as an editor on a like a daytime talk show called Karamu. And it's Karamu Brown from Queer Eye, and he does like conflict resolution. And I don't know if that's the cup of meat for the Trek crowd, but the dude is amazing. Like he comes from a social work background, and he just like does conflict resolution, and he's very compassionate. It's like daytime TV, but he really does get people on a path to healing, and he's just incredibly insightful and just incredibly smart. So syndicated, check your local listings. So that's right now. We're on season 2 of that and waiting to find out if we get a season 3. And I love my team. And I do feel like the show, I'm not going to claim it's high art, but I do think it does some people some good. More in the genre realm, we're in the very, very early stages of trying to come up with a raising strategy for a low budget horror comedy that my wife wrote, a werewolf coming of age film called Wolf Crazy. And it's won some awards. It's like it's won some like script competitions or placed or gone far. And it's fun and it's funny. And we kind of read it and we're like, we could shoot this relatively inexpensive kind of in and around our hometown. So we're just in like we're putting together a pitch deck. We've got like a tone trailer, and we're just kind of like in the early stages of putting together a budget and figuring out, how we can like like how we can shoot it for as little as money as possible and not make it look incredibly cheap. So there's that. Stay tuned. I'll let you know if anything comes of that. Like it takes like 150 miracles to make a movie, and so far we've had one, which is a finished script. So there's a short film that's making the festival rounds right now called Radio Silence that I did actually storyboards for some of the VFX scenes, and that is written by an incredibly talented actress named Nakia Seacrest and directed by my friend Rick Serena, who also happened to direct a lot of the promos for the final season of Picard. That brings us back around to Star Trek, because he would text me and be like, I can't text you any pictures right now, but I'm doing Picard and it's so cool. So Radio Silence, radiosilence.com. So that I just did some storyboards on, but it's just a lovely, lovely little short. And then last year it just came out, and I barely touched this, but I want to give it its flowers. I did a little visual effects editing on a Steven Soderbergh project, not Full Circle. It's called the Command Z Project, and it's internet only. Just a friend was doing some visual effects, and he brought me on as a VFX editor. But I barely touched it. Like, I really can't claim any kind of creative input on that, except that it's just an incredibly funny script, and it's Steven Soderbergh. And they released it as webisodes, I think. It's called the Command Z Project. And shot it all on iPhones. And it's so that's a really funny thing. So that, and I'm just trying to do a lot of writing these days, but I don't have anything to really show off yet. So I'll let you know if anything comes of that.
Well, that's the creative process. It's doing a lot and hoping something catches on.
Yeah, absolutely. Just throwing stuff at the wall. I'm grateful to just do whatever I get to do.
Well, Vaj, it's time for me to make this interview painful for you, more than it has already been, because it's time for the lightning round now. Okay. I'm going to throw some questions at you, and we're going to see what you think. So, best day on the job and worst day on the job, and that can include post-production.
Oh, like, can I talk about just like throwaway jobs that I've had?
You can talk about anything you want, as long as it doesn't get you in trouble for future jobs. That's my advice.
Best day on the job. I feel lucky. I've had a lot of good days on the job. I don't even know if I can boil it down to one in particular. I mean, there are just days, even now, if I'm on a set and I'm surrounded by just people that are just working so hard to make something happen, that I just stand back and I just go like, wow, I am so lucky to like be here among these people. Definitely not the smartest guy in the room, but how lucky I am to just traffic with these, just brilliant, driven people. And that's, whether that's, when we're shooting Karamu, or, I definitely had, I don't know, a music video I directed one time. There was just, we kind of got to the end of the day, and I was so in awe of like all these, we had these dancers involved, and just like all these talented people came on to work on this and help on this. And, it like, I almost started to get a little teary eyed. So, those, string of good days. And of course, that one day on the Paramount lot back in, 1980 something, that was up there. Worst day. I don't know if this is the worst day ever, but it's up there. I worked on a talk show where I basically found out we were canceled on page 6 of the New York Post. We were trying to find out if we were going to get another season. And my assistant editor just texts me this article saying, hey, such and such a talk show is canceled. And we had heard nothing about it from the production, from anybody. And, we even went into the executive producers, who were like, oh, so first we've heard about it. And then lo and behold, the next day, the production company was like, oh, yeah, sorry to break it to you, but we're canceled. And we were expecting, I think, another 8 to 12 weeks of production. And, when you're a freelancer, you make plans, you plan according to that. So just when a show is very abruptly canceled like that, it's a gut punch. now I'm thinking about the strikes that just happened, and a lot of people have had it much harder than I have. There's a lot of crew that really suffered through that. But that was not a fun day. Just because we were stopped so suddenly in our tracks.
Well, how about something you know today that you wish you knew when you were younger?
Something I know today that I wish I knew when I was younger: age does not confer wisdom, at least not in my case.
How about most valuable piece of advice that someone ever gave you, whether it's about life or about editing or about acting or your profession, whatever, that you still think about and use today?
The one off the top of my head is just jump in and get burned again.
Hmm.
At the time, I think I was talking to someone. I was young, I was a teenager, and I think I had broken up with a girlfriend, and I was sad, and I was like, "Oh, I'm never gonna love again," or something like that. And my friend was just like, "No," he was older. He was an older family friend. He was like, just jump in and get burned again." And I feel like that can be extrapolated to so many things. Anytime you fail, anytime you feel like you failed, just jump in and get burned again.
And last question for the day, Vaj. What's the best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe?
Woo! There's a lot good there. I love the fans. I think the fans are probably some of the most optimistic people, in terms of fan bases in general. I know I'm painting with a broad brush, but it's such a fundamentally optimistic franchise. I mean, ultimately, whatever problems we may have with Klingons or Borg or the Bajorans or whatever, ultimately humanity has transcended all of our issues. We're kind of a post-need society. Everybody it has food and shelter and can pursue their passions and does so with dignity and honor. And I'm in awe of the fan base who falls in love with that, because I feel like maybe there's an aspect of that in the fan base. I'm in awe of the world created by that. Um, and I just, I love optimistic visions about the future, and I love that I got to be a little part of that.
It's kind of fun that you mentioned the fandom because, we met last year because of Trek Long Island, and you and I talked before the event as well. And that was also the first time you'd seen Robin Curtis since you shot Star Trek 3. Here you are now, you're getting back into the world of Star Trek in some ways. I mean, what's it been like for you now to not only just be the fan, but now you're sitting on the other side of the aisle. You're now the one being asked the questions. I mean, that's got to be a pretty cool thing.
I was as nervous as you were on our first panel. I mean, that was my first panel ever. And it's great. I mean, it's great, but it also, I just feel like I'm just counting the seconds until I say something irredeemably stupid, and you know this whole thing ends. But it's fine, because I'm coming to it with a place of just complete gratitude and love of the franchise, love of the fans. So it was amazing, and thank you for being there, because having you there, I know you said you were nervous, but you were a very reassuring presence to me.
Oh, thank you.
As we had chatted a little bit beforehand, and obviously Robin is wonderful, and
Robin
she'll
could have done that by herself. We weren't even
I was
needed.
gonna say, like, no, I wasn't. Like, she'll carry any panel that we're on. I mean, she's amazing. Like, that woman just lights up the room. Like, I cannot say enough good things about her. It was so cool reconnecting with her.
I don't want to give away too many things here, but we talked before the event and you were kind of nervous about how the reception was going to be for you since you were like, "Oh, I've only did this little thing or whatever." But like I know fans were interested in seeing you. They're interested in talking to you. They wanted to take your photo. And that, it kind of goes to show you that in the world of Star Trek, even if you're there for less than a minute, the fans still want to know your story. They still want to learn all about you. And I'm hoping that that was kind of reassuring to you just in general
Oh,
about this fandom and everything because, fans love all this kind of stuff. That's why I do this kind of show as well to get these stories told, to get them out there. But more so, the reason I'm saying this is because I hope you do more Trek conventions. I hope you keep doing them, and I hope you can connect with more fans and keep that story going.
yeah. I'm chatting with someone about potentially one next summer. So I will, I'll let you know if it's happening. If it happens, you can maybe just throw it out there as an aside on a future podcast if you want. But yeah, I love going to the cons either, no matter what side of the table I'm on. I really love being there and being among the fandom and among like the creativity of it. Because the fans are some of the most creative people too. I mean, it's obviously the people making Star Trek are amazing, but the fans are just insanely creative. It's just cool to be among that.
Well, we appreciate you being on here today. We appreciate you talking with the fans and all that cool stuff. But again, thank you so much for chatting with me today and telling us all your stories, not just about Trek, but about post-production and everything else that you're doing. It's really cool to see somebody, who did this one little bit of Trek, just do something else completely out there that's still in the same kind of universe, still producing, making stuff. And really, that is kind of the spirit of Nimoy. Nimoy was a photographer. Nimoy was an artist. He was a poet. He did all these sorts of things. So, while you might not be acting in the next Star Trek series, you still have that same spirit. And he definitely made the right choice bringing you into that film.
Oh, thank you, man. Thanks so much for having me. And this is a really great podcast. I mean, I've listened to a bunch of episodes, so I'm really flattered and honored that you devoted one to me. So thank you.
How can I not? You're Spock number 2 on this show. I mean, you're the second one I've had, so I got to keep that number going.
That's right.
Right,
I'm only the second Spock you've had on the show.
So it's been you and Ethan Peck.
Okay.
So you're in good company.
Yeah. But I'm a little more Spock than Ethan Peck, right? I mean, he's kind of phoning it in, right?
He's okay, but he as far as like breathing heavy while staring at someone goes, you're way better at that.
Definitely, yeah. I perfected that at a very young age. No, Ethan Peck is amazing. I feel like I just have to say that. I love his Spock. I'm way into it.
But there's room for all the Spocks out there.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Vadia. It's been awesome.
Yeah.
Let's do a proper one before we go.
Yeah. Live long and prosper, my friend. And live long and prosper to anybody who's watching or listening to this.
That's it for this week's episode of Trek Untold. Thank you for checking it out. Don't forget to follow us on social media, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok at Trek Untold, and subscribe wherever you are listening to or watching on. And that includes the audio versions on whatever platforms that might be, and our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@TrekUntold. If you'd like to support this show financially, please consider visiting patreon.com/TrekUntold to become a member of this show. And along with getting access to all sorts of wonderful perks, you'll also know that you're helping out this show continue to thrive, survive, and make new content all the time. I'm Matthew Kaplowitz. This has been Trek Untold. Thanks for watching. And until next time, always remember, fortune favors the bold.
Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars, is powered by the Rageworks Podcast Network and affiliated with Nerd News Today.